We are doing a very special horror movie review. In fact, it's not just a review, it is a retrospective. We are going to talk about the original Evil Dead trilogy and everything that comes with that. So, why don't you come sit down and get a little groovy with us? The Evil Dead trilogy, the original trilogy made in the 1980s all the way to the early 1990s. A little different where we're covering an entire series almost. I know we're not covering everything in it, but these are the quintessential movies. I am your host, Rob Coakley. I am joined, as always, by Dave Wilkins. Dave, what's going on?
What's going on? Happy to be here. This was a fun trilogy that I enjoyed growing up as a kid, and it was even more fun going back and reliving them.
And also Jesse Wilkins.
Thank you for having me, boys. If you guys haven't watched these movies yet, they'll be full of spoilers. Also, these are old movies, so
Yeah, well,
So
I
yeah,
mean,
fair game, right?
yeah, at this point, the statute of limitations has passed. Um, I don't want me and Dave to talk too much about the first one. We did originally do an Evil Dead 1 review. If you want to go back and listen to that, me and Dave both gave it 5 stars. But Jesse, I don't think you were like overly familiar with the Evil Dead franchise as a whole. And you've gone, and I think you've recently watched these first 3 movies for the first time. Am I correct in that?
yeah, some of it seemed kind of familiar, so I think I may have seen it, maybe the first one or pieces of it, anyways, over time. But no, had I sat down and watched it with my full attention, no, I don't think so. But I did go back and I've watched all 3 of them, and then started watching the show as well and some other content as well. But yeah, so with the first movie, I started off and watching. I'm like, fuck is this? The hell's going on here? And then I was like, oh, this is stupid. Oh, wait, this is awesome. And that's kind of how it went with the whole first movie for me. And the wife came down and she's like, what is this? I'm like, you got to sit down and watch this. And she's like, no. She left. She missed out. So I did listen to you guys to your review on it, and judging off everything that you guys said, which kind of was like how this kind of set the tone and the budget that they had and the creative things that they did, and how nothing else really was doing what they were doing at the time, mixed in with like kind of the awesomeness of the backstory, which was the demonic book and all these kind of things that were going on. I don't see how to not give it a 5 as well. It's go ahead.
I was just saying, right? Yeah, it starts off campy. You're not sure what to, especially if you hadn't seen it before, and you're in your you're in your 30s at this point. It's not something you grew up watching. I can understand like when you're first getting into it. It's a little.
I'm 22 years old.
Oh, yeah, we know. It's a little tough to get into at that point, but I do think it holds up enough that like once the story starts going, and I'm glad you're here to like kind of back that theory up, which I think makes it really cool because it's not a perspective me and Dave could bring to the table for it.
Mm-hmm. It was still like a lot of people watch these movies, especially the second one, and especially the third one, as we'll get into in a little bit. It turns into more comedy, but like the first one still had jumpy moments, and it still had like, oh, that's kind of messed up. It still had those moments. So whether you categorize it as comedy or horror, overall, just what it was as a whole was unbelievably entertaining, and it set the tone for a lot of things to come.
Yeah, I wouldn't categorize the first one as comedy at all. I think it was straight horror, and it was shocking, especially back in the 1980s. I mean, I wasn't around in 1981, but I saw it probably in the early 90s when I was a kid, and it was just a shocking movie. You know, obviously the graphics don't really hold up, but if you can respect that kind of old school, cinematography and special effects they used, there was no CGI at the time. They used a lot of practical effects, and they used a lot of that 16 millimeter stop motion. So they did that, and they did it really well. And the movie was really just, I found to be very shocking and very disturbing.
And again, just the camera work that they did in that movie, which just like advanced cinema, not just horror movies or anything. It advanced cinema. That scene of them going through the woods, no one else was doing that, and it's such an important movie in that aspect that a lot of it launched the career of Sam Raimi, one of the biggest directors in Hollywood for years and years and years now. And if this movie wasn't made, we wouldn't have Sam Raimi movies, in the future. Some of the movies would have still got made, but just not with his spin on it.
Right.
So what would you give you gave the first movie a 5, Jesse?
I'll give it a 5. Yeah.
All right, let's get into the second movie. And this is where I think the franchise really starts to become what the franchise actually is. In the second movie, it's a pretty interesting story. I highly suggest, if anyone gets the chance, and do it. I usually recommend, like, if you're going to read a book, you can read a book, but if you're going to listen to an audiobook, the autobiography of Bruce Campbell, where he goes into a lot of the making of the Evil Dead movies, amongst other stuff, he reads it himself, and it's just such a great listen. And you can listen to how these movies were made. But what happened with this second movie is the beginning of this movie is a remake of the first one, like, which remakes weren't really a huge thing back then, especially with the same actors or anything like that. And they have to remake this movie because they can't get footage to the original movie. So Sam Raimi says, you know what? We'll just redo it. We'll just reshoot everything I want to reshoot. And that sets the tone for the movie, and they have a bigger budget, so he gets to do it a little bit more the way he wants to do it.
Okay,
as well.
so that's it was a remake. I was so confused watching the second. I'm like, why doesn't he recognize where he is? Like, what?
Yeah.
So I was like, did he forget?
No. It's
okay.
a remake / sequel.
Okay, because that was gonna be my only like downside to the second movie.
Is that it's basically just a parody of the first movie?
Yeah.
There's that, but no, I was like, the story doesn't make sense here. Like, why doesn't he recognize this cabin? Why doesn't he know what was going on here? Why doesn't he know about the book and the recording? I'm like you were there, bro. Like, this was the most traumatic event of your entire life. So, okay, if it's a remake, that changes things for me for sure.
So this is a recurring problem within the Evil Dead stuff, where like a different studio owns like every movie throughout the years, all the way up until the TV show, where you don't see anything from Army of Darkness because they couldn't get any of the rights back to Army of Darkness for the TV show. So the name of the places that he works, everything, they don't really reference it too much because they can't. And it was just a recurring thing with all of these movies. So that's what sets the tone for the second one. There's a lot of headaches that went into making these movies over stuff like that, but I loved it. And I love that. I love that this series, the first 3 are 3 different types of movies. I classify the first one as a full-on horror movie. The second one to me is like comedy / horror.
It's like campy horror.
Yeah. And then the third one is an
Straight
action
comedy.
adventure movie.
Yeah.
Like with comedy. It's just a whole different genre on the third one. But the second one, I think, is where the series really finds its voice.
I like the second one. It was a lot of fun. It was basically just like an extension of the first one, while kind of not, it's as if the first one didn't exist, which I thought was cool. And I'm going to tell you my favorite part of the second one. My favorite part of the second one is when his hand is possessed and he has to cut it off, and he cuts his own hand off, right? And then it pans over to the stack of books next to him, and the book on the top of the pile is A Farewell to Arms.
Yeah.
I noticed that as well. It's so good.
So good.
There were so many good wacky things that happened in that house. It was just, but for some reason they still felt safer inside the house that was actively trying to kill them. They're like, if you go out there, you're dead. It's like, dude, if you stay in here, you're probably dead.
Right. My favorite scene from the entire second one is like the famous gif of where he's going mad and he just like looks into the camera and he's covered in blood and he just has that look on his face. I use that gif a lot. I love that scene, but I just love this entire movie. The continuation, just everything they did with it. They upped the special effects. The deer on the wall is actually terrifying, but still hilarious. Like, it's just so good.
It was a great time. The second one, and I remember when I originally watched it, I wasn't sure about it either because I was like, because when I first watched it, I didn't know anything about why it was being made or how it was being made. And it was the same thing. I was like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, this doesn't make sense. But it was still like by the end of the movie, I was like, this was a blast. These movies are so fun.
Yeah, I mentioned it on a previous review that like halfway through I think it was the Trick or Treat review, where at the point in that movie where Sam takes off his mask and he's the pumpkin monster. At that point, you're having so much fun. You're like, fuck it, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that was about like maybe halfway through Evil Dead 2, where things are just so many wacky and silly things are happening inside the house. There's like a full-blown musical and just the holes in the wall and just I can't even begin to think of all the crazy things that happen in this house. At one point, I'm sitting there watching it. I think it was when they introduced the claymation into it, and there was a big claymation like Beetlejuice monster in there. I was like, "This is awesome. You guys do whatever you want. I'm watching this whole thing, and I don't care what you do. You can do anything."
That's that 16. That's that 16mm stop motion effect that we all love so much.
Mm-hmm.
The blood that came from the wall is a great part in the movie as well. There's still some terrifying moments in this. One of the ones that stands out is when he's going nuts and crazy and then he wakes up and he was just like imagining everything, but yet shit's still hitting the fan when he wakes up. Like that type of stuff was so well done. Like everything in this movie is really well done. The effects of the deadites coming at you was upped in this as well. Like they really focused on making that effect even more terrifying. And I think that sticking with not knowing what's coming at you is such a great call by them, because you never know what it is that they see. They're absolutely terrified every time they see it, though. And you see that throughout the movies.
Well, you also had monster lady or zombie lady in the basement, right? That was in 2. And that was legitimately scary and creepy. And then you had her talking to her daughter and like she kind of tries to come back to form. He's like, no, I was trying to trick you. And then they went full blown. One of the great scenes where I was like, I don't know what they're going to do here, was when he went full blown possessed. And I believe he had briefly gotten possessed in the first movie too, right? I think like the thing had pulled him through the woods and he fell in a puddle. And when he got up, he was possessed, right? I believe that was the first movie. Maybe it was the second movie.
It might be the second one.
I'm pretty sure, and I might be wrong.
I think you watched all these more recently than we did, so you could be right.
Yeah.
I also watched them all within the span of 2 days, so I might be mixing movies together. But the first, I believe it was the first one. I believe he was pulled through the woods and he was dropped into like a puddle. And when he got up, he was possessed for a little while, but then he snapped out of it. And this one, I was like, is he just the bad guy now? Because it was a long possession. He's like trying to break down the door and he's trying to kill everybody. And then eventually he just snaps out of it. He's like, I'm fine. And the girl's like still beating him up. Like, he's like, I told you I'm fine. And like, I'm like, I would still be trying to kill him. Like you weren't fine 2 seconds ago. Who's to say this isn't going to happen again? Like, kill this man. You know, he just killed another guy who was possessed. So it was cool.
We get the great scene in the shed too, as well, when he brings the girlfriend in there, puts her on like that vice grip, and we get introduced to the chainsaw.
That's what we like to call elevated horror.
This movie would not fit into the elevated horror genre at all.
But we get introduced to like one of the trademark things in the entire series, which is the chainsaw. And it's just so well done. Like in terms of that hand scene, like you said, is the whole hand scene is just great. It's just so wonderful. Like the fact that like just the looks he gives. Bruce Campbell is so perfect for this movie. I
can't picture anyone else in this role.
Yeah.
Nick Cage maybe, but it's just not, you know what?
Yeah.
I want to see a remake with Nicolas Cage.
Well, he probably goes too campy. Where like Bruce
Campbell went pretty campy.
But he can pull it back.
The difference is you can take Bruce Campbell serious in some scenes. You can never take Nicolas Cage serious in any scene ever.
Right.
True.
He pulls it back. So like he goes campy and like he goes real campy in Army of Darkness, but he still has moments where he pulls it back. And that's what I like about him. And I love that Sam Raimi, because we've talked about this before. Sam Raimi and his brother, I believe it's Ivan, are the ones that wrote this. And they all grew up together with Bruce Campbell. And like Sam Raimi brings Bruce Campbell on movies to specifically torture him. So that's what he does. He brings him in and he's like, basically, what can I do to fuck with Bruce on this movie? And that's why like Bruce Campbell is forced to do all this crazy stuff to himself. He's doing the flip scene. He's smashing plates over his own head. He's doing all this stuff because basically just to entertain Sam Raimi. He's like, this is what I find funny. He's done it in movies as recently as Doctor Strange. Like he brought Bruce Campbell in that movie and he makes Bruce Campbell beat the shit out of himself on that movie. It's great. Love it. And if you watch that movie, there's
was that the newest Doctor Strange or the original? I haven't seen the newest one yet.
Yeah.
So I think we went to go see the original together, actually.
Did we?
Yeah, it was good.
The second one, so Sam Raimi does the second one, and that's the one spoiler I'll give is that the Bruce Campbell, and there are like dead characters in there, and they look a lot like Deadites, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so that is pretty cool. You know what else I saw recently was Hubie's Halloween, and they had a character in that movie who looked exactly like Bruce Campbell. I was like, oh, that's cool. But they had him kind of paying homage to him, I feel like, a little bit by bringing someone that looked like him, but it turned out to not be him. And I was pretty disappointed because I was like, this is awesome. I told the kids, I'm like, oh, he's from another movie and this is awesome because they did that. And I looked up, it was like some young guy on IMDb. I'm like, no, that's not him. Never mind. Just looked like him in the movie.
Is there anything else we want to hit on before we get into Army of Darkness?
No, I want to get into Army of Darkness.
Yeah, so the transition between 2 and 3 was awesome because 1 and 2, obviously, with you telling me that it was a reboot, we'll get into ratings in a second. Is that what you're going to say, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it sounds like you're transitioning. So.
Okay. Well, we can do that after. Let's do ratings first.
Okay. I'm going to give this a 5.
Well, let's talk about how we're going to go into. I figured we were going to cut there.
Are we cutting?
Oh, we can. Well, now we are.
It just felt like I stopped to explain myself. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
All right. Give me 3, 2, 1. So before we cut over to Army of Darkness, we should give our ratings on this. And shockingly, I'm going to give it a 5.
Wow, I'm shocked.
Are you? Yeah.
I am.
What about you, Jesse?
I don't know how to not give it a 5. Like we're talking horror movie reviews. Do I still classify this as complete horror? I don't know. I don't know what to say, but I will say that I enjoyed this from beginning to end and it was fucking awesome. And I'm going to give it a 5.
There you go. Dave?
Yeah, this movie was a blast. It's I don't hold it as high regard as the first one because it's the first one was the influential one. The first one was the cult classic, the one that was so important. It paved the way for so many other movies, including the second one. So as I don't hold the second one as high regard as the first one, the second one's a 5.
I was ready to boo you. I was ready to give you.
No, I love it.
I was ready
it's hard to not. It's just. I love.
Now, am I giving these 5s because I'm afraid of what you two will do to me if I don't? Maybe. But this is part of the mystery. This is part of the aura around the Evil Dead franchise.
All right, let's get into Army of Darkness. And we haven't talked about this one before, but because Jesse's so new to the franchise, I need to hear your take on this movie.
It was very silly. And back to you.
All right.
No, I like the transition. So I like the fact that it just picked up right where 2 left off. And it was like, because once 2 ended, you're like, what? This man just time traveled. But you see it was foretold that this savior would come and he has a chainsaw in his hand in this old medieval drawing or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you're like, all right, well, let's see where this goes. And I like that it picked up right where it left off. It was a smooth transition into a absolutely silly story.
Oh, the story was a blast. This was Army of Darkness for me is like if you took a bunch of acid and watched Temple of Doom and then Lord of the Rings 2 Towers consecutively. And you mash those 2 movies together and just Yeah, it was a blast. It was like you said, it was more like action adventure / comedy, and it was just so much fun because you were like, I'm wondering like where are they going to go with this? You know, we saw the first one, we saw the second one, which was pretty much the same movie. Obviously, you knew it was going to go a completely different direction with the way 2 ended, but you know, I was like, as long as it doesn't end up back at the cabin and being the exact same movie again, I'm fine with it. And it fucking did.
It had nothing to do with it, and it had everything to do with it. And they did a great job of making a completely new movie in a completely new time period that shouldn't have made any sense whatsoever, but they tied it in. They had the book. They were looking for the book. They had, when they were throwing these guys down into the pit to punish them and put them to death, basically, you think that they're getting mauled by like a bear or an alligator or something, right? And it turns out to be the zombies, these demonic possessed creatures that they're holding down in that well to use to execute their war criminals or their prisoners.
Yeah. And
it was such a cool angle. And of course, Bruce goes down there and he wins that fight, mainly because there was the one priest or the I can't remember what they called him.
It's like a wizard type or
no,
whatever.
He wasn't a wizard. He was like
the old wise man type guy.
What do they call him in Game of Thrones? In Game of Thrones, they have a title. The Maesters. He was a Maester, right? Yeah. So he's basically the Maester, and they call him over. He's like, wait, no, this is the prophecy. This guy is the one. They're like, nah, screw him. He's with the Red King or whatever.
Scots.
Just throws him down into the hole, and the Maester throws down the chainsaw, and he's able to fire it up. And awesome scene. But what I'm saying is that they did a great job of sprinkling in the fact that this demonic possession or this demonic entity was still out there, and it was still a force to be reckoned with. And Bruce had an objective here, and that was to lead these people and save these people. And it was such a wild move to make. And so I pulled it off.
I think what happened is they never set out to make horror movies in the beginning. This wasn't like they wanted to make comedies. Clearly, we can see that and the trajectory of their movies, right? That's what they always wanted to make when they were coming up and making films. And I think that when they made Evil Dead 2, because the next movie they made after the Evil Dead flopped, and they had to go do the second one because that was like what they were offered to do. I think what Sam Raimi and everyone probably did was they were like, all right, let's make an ending so batshit crazy that no studio is going to want us to make a third. So they do the time travel thing, and they set it up so that like, yeah, you want us to make a third? It's going to be something completely different and crazy. I dare you to make us want to make a third. And the studio was like, guess what? We want you to make that movie. And they were like, fine, we'll make this movie then. Right? Like, so they just went all in on it. And I think that the great part of this is you see it very, very little in the first movie. And then in the second movie, you really see the Ash Williams character start to become the Ash Williams character. And then in the third movie, the character's fleshed out. We know who he is. The one-liners, the aura of Ash Williams becomes legendary.
The shotgun, the chainsaw, the womanizing, the one-liners, everything about him is just awesome. Everything. It was so cool. And I was glad they addressed this later in the movie. So when they're kind of preparing for the final fight, he finally pops open the trunk and grabs a bag of ammunition. I'm sitting there, I'm like, this man has a double barrel shotgun. I don't see anything in his pockets.
A double barrel shotgun that he fires off 6 consecutive shots.
Yeah, like where is
how does that work?
This is one of those things where it's like, dude, I watch anytime there's a shootout on TV, I'm counting the bullets. I'm like,
me too. I know.
This man has fired his handgun 42 times without reloading. Where is he getting the ammo?
And,
but you just don't care in this movie.
Don't care.
You just don't care.
He has the unlimited shotgun. But I started to say was they did address it. So he popped open his trunk and grabbed the box of shotgun shells. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the 600 that he already shot off had ran out from his pocket change. So.
And they get the car, even though they go to 1300s. They found a way to get Sam Raimi's car in his movie, as they always do.
And of course, he had some scientific book in his trunk that helped him out to make gunpowder and all these new.
The mechanical hand. He had his hand chopped off. And he just makes I love that they
without his science book, they made the mechanical hand.
I know. In order for him to make a mechanical hand that works like a real hand, like some iRobot type of stuff, he has to go back to 1300 AD to be able to have that kind of technology to make that mechanical hand.
And it has super strength because he just like crushes that metal goblet. It's so good.
I loved when they originally were like, all right, you got to go get the book, right? We need this Necronomicon book in order to send you back to where you're going to go. So you get us this book, we'll send you back to your time. And he's like, all right. They're like, all right, now you need to remember these words that you have to say. Okay, the incantation is very important. He's like, repeat after me. So he repeats after him. And he's like, repeat after me again. And Bruce Campbell's like, you know what? I got it. And he goes and he finds it and he forgets the words and says it all wrong. And when he comes back, he says, that was close.
Maybe a syllable or two off. Yeah, something like
it's such a great
to tie it into the end as well.
It's such a great scene because he goes there and he says the first two words right. And he's just like, I know it begins with an N. And he just goes, no.
Yeah.
He just like looks around. And he grabs
I think universally, and I'm sure you guys can agree with me, like the one scene that I thought could have gone and I was like, this is just too much, was when he was in the windmill and all like the little miniature versions of him popped out. And I was like, this is just stupid. And it's still fun, but I was like, this is going on too long. But they kind of saved it. So I think he ended up eating one of them, or one of them. Oh, they like jumped down into his mouth.
Yeah.
And then they saved this by the creepy scene of the eye popping out of his shoulder.
Yep.
And it was like really well done. I was like, oh God, that is freaking eerie. And then it turns into the second version of him, which obviously made the rest of the movie. So I was fine with it after the fact. But while I was watching, I was like, God, what are we doing?
Nope, loved
it's
it.
Just a bunch of little mini Bruces. Just
loved every moment.
It was just so Looney Tunesy, and yeah, but it worked out. And I thought them creating like an Evil Dead version of him to be the leader of the Dead Army, battling himself, with the human beings. It was a cool angle to take.
Yeah, I disagree because I love that entire scene. I love everything about it. I love the way that they come out of the broken mirror. I thought was really well done.
Yeah, because they're just looking down. It's like, that's a lot of reflections doing the same thing.
Well,
it was
because
cool.
at first he sees his reflection not mimicking him,
right?
And he gets like, he's like, "Fuck!" So he breaks the mirror. But he makes it worse because he breaks the mirror, and now he just multiplies the amount of them that comes out of the mirror. And everything that ensues. One of my favorite parts is him just drinking the boiling water.
Oh, yeah.
After the guy jumps down his throat. Well, yeah.
So wacky.
And then again, yeah, that part is a little creepy where the one that possesses him is like splitting off from him. Really well done scene. And then we get one of the best one-liners that there is. And he's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm evil, you're good, Ash. Little goody two-shoes, Ash." And just like doing like the little goody two-shoes thing. And then he just blasts him in the face with a shotgun. And he goes, "Good, bad. I'm the guy with the gun."
Yeah. It's a great line.
Such a great line.
It's a real cowboy line.
Yeah.
He has a lot of good one-liners in this.
Yeah, he crushes the one-liners in this. But yeah, then you go to the graveyard scene, and that entire scene's great. The Three Stooges. I'm not even a Three Stooges fan per se, but
I know exactly what you're talking about, though.
The way they incorporated that with the skeletons was so well done. Like I love that part of it.
Yeah.
The way that
go ahead. Sorry.
The way that they just go from like utter like ridiculous slapstick comedy, but then go back to like a threatening pace on stuff. I really like the transitions between those two, which if you pitch that to somebody, you would probably be like, there's no way this is going to work, but it works.
What I liked about this movie is it was 80 minutes long, and they crammed so much into this 80 minutes, and it made it work so well. It was fast paced. It moved along. They covered a lot of ground, and it was entertaining from beginning to end. And it was just like a perfect feature length. Actually, it might not even technically be considered a feature length because it's under 90 minutes, but close enough. But it ended up just being like a perfect movie from beginning to end.
There's no wasted scenes.
Right.
There's like you watch this movie and it is just paced so well.
It didn't need to build. So it was basically one giant movie from the first one. There was no in between. There was no rebuilding. There was no new character development that needed to happen before the story kicks off or anything. It just kept going. It kept going from the first one. He dropped through the portal. Second one starts. Boom. He wakes up. He's like, oh shit, what am I doing here? You know, it would just picked right up and it flowed great. It was just, I'm just watching. I'm like, this is awesome.
There was a little character development between the English Lord and the Scottish Lord at the end there, where they defeat the army of darkness.
Yeah,
and then both armies they draw their swords at each other, and then the two leaders of the army walk out and they hug and everyone cheers.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome.
What a feel good scene that was.
And I thought the battle scene, so it gets to that battle scene, and I thought the battle scene for 92 was done really well. Like,
it was awesome
with what they had to work with, like doing the skeletal thing. Like everything was like super well done in this.
It worked. It worked stop motion. It must have taken so
long,
fucking long.
It worked because they had embraced the silliness. If this was an episode of Game of Thrones, you'd have been like, dude, what are you doing? You know, so, but they had embraced the silliness so they could do whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know, it was all awesome and it all worked.
You know
I love the skeletons.
You know what scene with the skeletons that I watched while watching this movie that I was like, that you were talking about? You remember how you were just saying like it probably took so long? I think it was one where they were just putting a ladder up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching the scene and I'm like, I can't even imagine how long it probably took to film this one sequence that lasted about 4 seconds. And it was basically just like a transition scene between like what's going on in the battle. I'm like, the amount of dedication to do that. And it's like, and it just goes through my head. Like anytime that we go to film something like in the future, when we're doing like a ghost story thing, like a reenactment or whatever, which I think we'll be doing more of in the future, I wanted to like just bring that scene into my brain and be like, anything we do will never be as time consuming as they probably took on that one thing.
We'll be filming a scene like, why is Rob scaling the wall?
Yeah.
Oh, he's reliving the Evil Dead 2. We have to get him to stop doing this.
We say this about the stop motion effects here, how long it must take, but I would imagine that the same scene CGI would take a lot longer. And I'm saying that not having any idea what I'm talking about, but I assume.
No, I'm sure.
None of us do. We're all like, yeah, good point.
Oh, definitely.
You're right about that. Yeah.
You're right.
We've done zero of either in our entire lives. But yes.
No, I'm sure it does take a long time with CGI too, but I'm just thinking like, just for how much of a like nothing shot in the grand scheme of things. Like if you took that out, it probably doesn't change the movie, but I have such a big respect for the fact that they did do it. And maybe it does change the movie because you don't see the level of dedication and like care in the movie. But after that, like it just balls to the wall. The entire battle scene is just great.
It was awesome. It was awesome from start to finish.
Yeah. And then we get to the ending, which is...
So before you go into that, I want to give them credit because you guys have watched Game of Thrones, you've watched Vikings, Last Kingdom, whatever. You've watched the shows, right? With the big battles. It seems like in every one of these battles that matters, the big twist at the end is some other army showing up and riding in on horses just when you think it's going to go the wrong way. That didn't happen in this movie. And I was so expecting that. I was like, the Scots are going to show up and they're going to save the day just when it seems like the battle is lost. Pretty sure that didn't happen. And that's what's
pretty sure it did happen.
Well, no, that they showed up when the battle was over. And
they showed up and helped. Right? No, they showed up. They showed up to help. They didn't turn the tide of the battle.
Right. And that's my main point is like Battle of the Bastards, Game of Thrones, spoiler, Game of Thrones. That was a changing moment. I'm sorry to do all Game of Thrones references here, but the battle where Tyrion did the big speech and got his face cut, right?
Yep.
The Tywin showed up with his whole army and just changed the course of the battle. Happened in so many every battle in Last Kingdom when you think it's going to end, it's always anyways. It's just the go-to, and it's just played out at this point. But obviously, for me, this movie is new, and this movie happened before all of those ones did. So it's a little bit irrelevant. But
Yeah,
I
it
was
happened in
glad to.
Braveheart too, in one of the battles in Braveheart. It's a common trope. But
It's probably
again,
historically accurate too. It probably happened, but probably
It
not
probably
as
happened
much.
a lot less frequently than it happens in cinema.
right. But this one, to your point, they showed up to help, but they were not they weren't
They weren't the reason the battle was won. Yeah.
right. I mean, it was just more men basically at that point.
Ash was the reason the battle was won. He was also the reason that the conflict between the English and the Scots were solved.
Right.
He did a lot.
That's true.
Yeah. He ended up saving the day. Is there anything else on the battle we want to hit on before we continue?
I think we
No.
wrap it up.
Okay. So the ending is very divisive, and I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this,
I'm not.
but I'm guessing everybody saw the ending where he's back in the S-Mart, right?
Yeah, back at his old job.
And he's telling the story about what happened, and like people are just like, yeah, him until shit hits the fan. Not the original ending to this movie. They were forced to shoot this ending. And from what I remember, Sam Raimi and everybody was pretty pissed that they were forced to reshoot the ending. The original ending, and you can still find it, is when they send him back to his own time, they don't send him back to the right time. They send him to the future. And everything is destroyed. And he gets
That's
sent.
so much better.
And that's the ending they wanted, was where to set up, if there was going to be a fourth one, that's where the fourth one was going to be in the future. And you can find that, and you can see him going mad in like a building. I think he's in London, maybe. I haven't watched that alternate, well, I guess the original ending in a while, but that's kind of what happens there. But the studio or somebody did not like that ending. What happened was they tested the movie. Everybody liked the movie until the ending.
Okay.
So
I can understand that. And I can appreciate the change because the TV show now, which I think we've all started watching, starts off basically with him working at the supermarket like 30, 40 years later or whatever. And so far, it's awesome. I'm enjoying it. So I'm going to watch more of that. It was as well. We've just had so much on the list to watch. But what do we do for ratings here, gentlemen? Rob, let's start with you.
I didn't even talk about the ending, and if I liked it or not because of the change.
Boom.
I actually like the change. I do like the original ending, but I like what they do with him in the S-Mart. I think it's fine. I like that whole scene. I think it's a great scene to go out on. And I think you get one of the iconic lines of Ash Williams in that, where he says, "Hail to the king, baby," which is it's just a great way to wrap up that movie with that line to me. I think it's done perfectly.
I was unaware of the original ending. Apparently, I'd never seen it, so that's fun. But I like it, the idea for the original ending, where because he screwed up the incantation again, and
Right.
spits him off into the future by accident. Great way to set up a sequel, or a great way to end the trilogy is the way they did it, exactly the way that they did it, which is they sent him back to his time, but he didn't do the incantation quite right, and that's why chaos ensues at the end there.
Mm-hmm.
I like both. So I had always just seen apparently the revised ending, and I loved it the way it was.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it a 5.
Wow.
I mean, dude, it's on my wall here. Like we have the movie on my wall. I love Army of Darkness. It's I love all of them. Army of Darkness is my favorite one to go back and watch.
Yeah. 100% Army of Darkness is my favorite of the three. I do understand that the first one, like I said, is the influential one that paved the way. It was the cult classic. It was the one that set the pace for all the others. But this one, 3 is the most fun for me. 3 is one that I'll watch. I'll have my kids watch. I'm actually kicking myself for not watching it with them the other night when we were watching horror movies, because they would have got a kick out of this, because they, with their cell phones, do their own little stop motion videos with their things, whatever they do. So I think they would get a kick out of this with all the effects. So this is a great one for me. It's a 5.
Cool. Jesse?
It's a 5, dude. This movie is the most rewatchable one. It really is. So like 1 and 2, I'll rewatch just because I'm curious.
Mhm.
One is like Dave said, like you said, one is probably the most important one, but it's not. It goes the opposite order for me. It's 3, 2, 1 for me in order of favorites. So it's so much fun. How can you not love this? It was fun from the first minute to the last minute, and I loved it. Yeah, it's a 5.
I'm really, really sad that they didn't get the movie that they wanted to make in the mid 2000s. Do you remember when Freddy vs. Jason came out?
I do.
Do you know what the sequel was supposed to be?
No.
Freddy versus Jason versus Ash.
Oh, wow.
Ash is going to win that one, right?
And that would have been...
You can't kill Ash.
Like, it would have been an amazing movie.
You know what would have been even better? Freddy versus Jason versus Ash versus Ash.
Yes.
Because you know he's going to fuck himself up in that movie, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a comic made, and I meant to check on that, but I think there is a Freddy versus Jason versus Ash comic, and I do need to go read that because I just need to see what they did with that dynamic, basically. But I'm so bummed that movie never came to fruition.
Me too.
It makes, not that Freddy and Jason movies didn't get silly at one point anyways, but it turns slashers into, is it comedy? You know, like it crosses that genre. I think it would have been awesome. And I don't really care that much for Freddy and Jason movies anyways. They're fine. They're not my favorite. I care more for Evil Dead at this point, and I think that would have been awesome to mix them up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Freddy stan, and I do enjoy the Friday the 13th movies, but Freddy always towed the line after the first movie of comedy and horror. I mean, some of his shit got real ridiculous towards the end of that run.
All of the slashers got ridiculous at one point. There's too many. There's too many slasher movies. You go back, you boil them right down. You boil them all down. You go back to the beginning. They all start off really strong, and they all get wacky. And then the remakes are usually, the remakes are hit or miss, but a lot of them are well done, I think.
It's a new day. They got to try to keep up with Art the Clown now.
That's true. That's true.
Art the Clown set the pace.
It's going to be a difficult one to top. So
we're gonna have to talk about the Friday the 13th remake at one point, because that movie gets a lot of hate, and I don't think it's that bad. Like, to be perfectly honest, so we're gonna have that discussion at some point.
Yeah, we can have that discussion, and we can discuss how Friday the 13th, the original, is the best slasher.
No,
I know you hate that.
That is inaccurate. It's not.
I know you hate that take. That's.
Yeah, we'll tease that for now. But that is going to do it. That is our Evil Dead retrospective. I'm very biased on this series. I'm glad that Jesse came in and liked this series. I didn't know which way you were going to go with it, honestly.
Neither did I.
But
neither did I. Like halfway through Evil Dead 1, I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. It's awesome.
It's so fun. It's such a fun horror series. If you haven't watched it, watch it. Make sure you get through the first one. But also understand when it came out. Early 80s, low budget, and appreciate some of the stuff they did in that movie. The tree scene in the first movie is like amazingly done for a horror movie. It's still terrifying to this day.
And wildly controversial.
But like, it's a bananas scene. So go back, watch the Evil Dead movies, watch the show, watch anything Evil Dead. Everything Evil Dead's fun. I like the Evil Dead remake.
Love the remake, 2013.
We'll cover that. I think it got unjustifiably hated on when it came out, and I think I know why, but we'll cover that at another time. Anything else you guys want to add?
Nope.
All right, that's going to do it for this Evil Dead retrospective. Make sure you're following us on Twitter for Hometown Ghost Stories. You can check us out on Patreon. Also, join our Discord, where you can come in, talk to other members of the community, talk to us, request horror movies. And the last place you can do that, other than a million other places, but check out our email, hometownghoststories@gmail.com. Until next time, that's Dave, Jesse, I'm Rob. Catch you later. Peace.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Jesse Wilkins here, Hometown Ghost Stories. Hope you enjoyed that episode. For more bonus side content episodes, swing on over to Patreon, get early access to this stuff, as well as some Patreon exclusive stuff. For as little as $3 a month, you can join on Patreon and help support the crew. We put a lot of money, effort, resources into these videos, and every little dollar helps. So consider it. Also, swing on over to the Discord. On the Discord, you can get access to us. You can contact us. You can share your stories, share your ghost pictures. It's just a better way to contact us. So swing on over to Discord. The link is below. It is free to join, completely free. Also, here are some other episodes that you can check out. Boom, boom. Check out those videos. Really cool stuff. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.